So we messed with our directional light, we messed with our skylight. The next thing we need to do is add in some fog. So we're going to go to our window, place actors, visual effects, and exponential height fog. And just adding a default exponential height fog already adds a lot more to the scene. Maybe things are too bright right now, we can always do a push and pull. In fact, I want to do a little bit of push and pull right now. I'm going to hold off on that. So let's look at the fog settings. You have the fog density. You can make the fog super thick. The fall off of how high the fog actually is. You have your fog and scattering color. And then you can see down there in the skybox. Let's actually look closer at that. So I brought my all off to 2. And if I play with the color, you can see it's taking effect out there in the scene. Right now I'll set it to 0.5. And let's say the density, I crank up to 2, you can see it's super thick, foggy. Maybe I don't want it that much. Density can be 1, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2. So you get the idea. 0.1. And then you have a directional and scattering color. That usually I like to match to the color of the light. We'll come back to that here in a bit. But a fun thing you can do is, that's needed on Unreal Engine, is the volumetric fog. Turn that on. And now you have kind of a fog that's, what's the best way to say it? It's like here you have this, like the fog filling up the scene, but volumetrics adds more light bounce and more interesting effects to the scene when it's volumetric. Against the whole deep dive into volumetric fog. I don't know the technicalities of it, but I always think it looks very awesome. So I'm going to leave it at that. And you can play with the scattering distribution of the volumetrics. The higher the volume, the more the light scatters. Set that back to the default. You can change the albedo of the volumetric fog. Cancel that. Change the emissive color of the fog. Basically, how much brightness of the fog is emitting. The extinction scale. How much fog is in the scene. The higher the value of the extinction scale, the more fog. Maybe that is the thing you want with your visual scene, something like that. But again, it's composition and your needs. So I'm not going to say what's wrong or what's right, but that's what that does. The view distance, basically how big, narrow, or wide the cone of the fog is. And the static lighting intensity, meaning how much light bounce is coming off of that of the light. So the higher the value, there's more light bounce. The lower the value, less light bounce. So I'm gonna leave. You can still play with the density up here, but let's bring the density down to like 0.1. The fall off of 2. So let's revisit our directional light. You have 2 settings here at the bottom, or not the bottom, but the bottom of the main light panel. Indirect lighting intensity and volumetric scattering intensity. Indirect lighting intensity meaning like how much. So you have direct lighting from the scene, but how much indirect lighting does it affect around the scene? Basically, a value of 0 disables any global illumination from this light. 1 is the default. So let's say you want more light scattering color. I get up to 2. You can see there's more indirect lighting that is yellow. If I bring it to 0.5, there's less indirect lighting that is yellow. So I usually like to leave that at 2. And the volume scattering intensity is based on the volumetric fog. So if I crank this up to 4, you see there's a lot more scattering of the light. Bring it back to 0, not as much. So again, how much you want in your scene is up to you. For me, let's say I will bring it up to 1.5. Maybe I think that's too much. Let's say even 0.8 volumetric scattering intensity. And now let's play with some of our light shaft bloom. Maybe I think it's too much bloom hitting the back of that tree. Let's bring the brightness down. Play with the threshold. Say my occlusion depth range is like 15,000. The mask darkness maybe about 0.3. And the other thing I didn't do is you can change the bloom tint. So let's click on that. And let's make it match the color of our light as close as possible. Or you can enter the exact value. But for my bloom tint, this is the hex color that I'll be using. Now maybe I want to play more with my skylight. You can, maybe I think it's too much skylight. I can bring the intensity down to 0.2. Or let's say I want more skylight, I can bring the intensity up to 0.6, but I think that feels washed out. So 0.2 is pretty good. Let's play with the color of the skylight again a little bit. See, if you look further in the background, the scene is very black, but as I bring up my value, it starts to brighten up, so I can see how the skylight is affecting my scene. Once again, it's at fully black, and the background behind the tree and the walls are very dark. And here I can slowly bring up the value. And I think that's pretty cool. Again, use what you think works best for you, but I am bringing the value just above black